can I say, you know, Deputy, and I just said to Deputy Connolly, that's a very disingenuous presentation.
Yeah.
I've condemned Israel's bombardment of Gaza, but it's never good enough for the left because they've always attempted to use the Middle East and Gaza as a wedge issue continually. And Ireland has demonstrated through its policy on the Middle East and on Gaza its independence in foreign policy. For God's sake, acknowledge it.
I'd love to.
Ireland recognised the state of Palestine with Spain and with Norway, but you couldn't reference that. No, you had to try and give the impression that Ireland was a party to genocide. How dare you say that in this House? Why this self-righteousness of the far left in this country? Makes me, it really frustrates me. And what didn't you talk about today? What didn't Sinn Féin talk about today? What didn't Paul Murphy talk about today? One of the proposals before you to approve today is whether we participate on an energy management course that costs €1,500, that costs €5,000 per member, 4 to 6 a year, and somehow if we participate in that course, we're going to jettison Irish military neutrality? Will you, for God's sake, wise up? Be honest with the Irish public. That's what's before you today. 4 programmes, 2 PESCO programmes, one about the critical seabed on a subsea, that we should cooperate with others, learn from others on how we protect undersea infrastructure and sea cables, which sustains thousands of jobs in this country. What planet are you on? What bloody planet are you on? There's no vote today on the triple lock. It is mentioned in the report. That will come with legislation. But there is a vote on whether we participate in subsea cables projects under PESCO. There is a vote on whether we participate in cyber worker exercises under PESCO. And we should. We saw what happened with the attack on the HSE. The only way you successfully be resilient in terms of cyber security in this country is if we work with other EU member states and work with other countries in terms of how we combat and resist criminal organisations and state actors, because since Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, the number of cyber attacks has exponentially grown. That is the reality. Exponentially grown. Cyber attacks, left, right and centre. We have to build up resilience. These are modest proposals before us. PESCO proposals, they're very modest. And I think, like yesterday at the committee, there was the chair and 2 members. There's no evidence yesterday that people were exercised about this. There was no, and the Deputy Cronin suggested that I made a light case for the PESCO project. I didn't actually. Quite comprehensive, quite substantive, quite substantive. Deputy, your own spokesman obviously couldn't make it yesterday. He asked for a debate at the committee, but he wasn't in a position to attend, and that can happen. But that can happen. But bottom line is, I was there for 1 hour and 45 minutes yesterday. There was no real argument yesterday about participating in an energy management course, about participating in the critical seabed infrastructure programme under PESCO, about participating in a cyber space programme. Is this Dáil really saying that we shouldn't participate on these programmes? I know you are, because I think, to be fair, I don't think you believe we should have an army at all. Deputy Barry has said he wants to cut defence expenditure, so he wants to cut the amount of money we're giving to the Irish Army and Defence Forces. Fair enough, that's his position. He said it. He said we should be cutting military expenditure. That is Deputy Barry's position. I would believe your position, Deputy Murphy, is you don't believe we should have an army at all. That's my view.
I don't believe we should participate in European militarisation.
And if I could, well, whatever that means.
We shouldn't be signing up to these projects.
You have your view as to what. Could I also trade through the chair that in terms of the triple lock issue, and there's a bit of a false sort of presentation, and Deputy has accused me of misinformation. We are not guilty of any misinformation.
Okay.
The UN General Assembly
Yes.
cannot approve a peacekeeping operation in practice. You know that.
It can, it's in our
Such
law.
operations are only ever deployed on the basis of mandates from the United Nations Security Council. The General Assembly cannot compel action. Hear me out a second.
A peacekeeping mission.
In certain instances where a matter is being considered by the Security Council and has been the subject of a veto, the General Assembly may consider the matter, make a recommendation to UN members for collective action. We did that recently on the mission of Palestine to UN. But ultimately, while other organs of the UN make recommendations to member states under the UN Charter, the Council alone has the power to take decisions which member states are obligated to implement. Only once, through the Chair, in history, has the UN General Assembly invoked the Uniting for Peace resolution and recommended a peacekeeping operation. And that happened nearly 70 years ago, when it established the first UN emergency force in the Middle East in 1956. And moreover, UNEF was not a peace enforcement operation as envisaged in Article 42 of the United Nations Charter, but a peacekeeping operation to be carried out with the consent and the cooperation of the parties to the conflict. And that is the bottom line here. And you know that, Deputy. It's the Security Council. It's the Security Council will approve or not approve peacekeeping missions. And they haven't approved any since 2014. That is the bottom line. And yes, I have mentioned Russia. I don't believe Irish foreign policy should be dependent, or decisions to participate in peacekeeping missions should be vetoed by a country like Russia. And I will name Russia. Because Deputy Howland asked me, what is our policy anchored in? It's anchored in multilateralism. It is centred on human rights. It is centred on, as demonstrated by our performance on the Security Council when we were on the Security Council for 2 years, peace and resolution of conflict, a particular focus on women in conflict, to protect women in particular in conflict. We have a good record internationally, but listening to the opposition tonight, one would imagine we had some sort of a terrible reputation internationally. For God's sake, would you at least acknowledge the positives in Irish foreign policy? I listen to Sinn Féin deputy after Sinn Féin deputy talk about warmongering and militarisation, all nonsense and not substantive, cannot be substantiated on any basis, because Ireland has a good international position. And that's what came across in the consultative forum, which was not a packed consultative forum. I think it's a disgrace to assert that. And it's an insult to the people who turned up at that consultative forum, who gave very informed viewpoints. What was a disgrace was, in my view, that members of this House and organisations outside tried to suppress debate. Sort of say, you shouldn't meet at all. We shouldn't discuss it. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about Deputy Murphy, who clearly didn't want it to happen and was of a view that it shouldn't happen. And it tried to attack people who participated in it, and it continues and it continues. And so the vote today is, okay, you either, because Deputy McCarthy or Carty did say at one stage publicly that he would support PESCO projects.
He said he would take everyone as it comes, look at it,
what he said was, if he was ever elected to government, he would not reverse.
He didn't say that.
He said he would not reverse participation.
He said he would take every thing that you're bringing forward to us,
in any event,
and
he
we
said
would look at it,
publicly,
and we are looking at it.
He's publicly on it. And it was interpreted at the time as that he wouldn't reverse.
Back and forth.
As much as anybody else is asking for an interaction, can we do it to the chair on both sides? It's Tánaiste has the floor. I understand that. I'm not the Tánaiste to do it through the chair.
What I'm now hearing from Sinn Féin, which is you're going to oppose the PESCO projects that's before you today. You're going to oppose. Sinn Féin is going to oppose, through the chair, is going to oppose Irish members of the Irish Defence Forces, 4 to 6 a year, participating on an energy management course that will cost €1,500 because you think, I don't know what you think, but that's Sinn Féin's foreign policy for you. And we have 17 installations. We are the biggest user of energy in the public service, the Defence Forces are. Why are we objecting to the Defence Forces participating on a PESCO programme, or an EDA programme, to learn better ways of energy saving, technologies to save energy? Why in the name of God would you vote against that? I think it's a very fair question to put up there. Could I equally say, because it was also raised, and I said the same to Deputy Healy, I mean, that's a fair point. I think you should vote for that, myself. On pay and benefits, I think Deputy Fitzpatrick, again, significant measures have been implemented, and Deputy Ward raised these issues. For the first time, all members of the Defence Forces are eligible for private healthcare. All enlisted members, and I introduced that as Minister. Private, in terms of the pay issue, it's been quite significant. Changes to pay, with the removal of the requirement for a private and marked time for the first 3 years, payment of the full rate of military service allowance to all, patrol duty allowance has been doubled, and new public service pay agreements, all of which means that recruits on completion of training which takes about 24 weeks, will now start at 39,321 in year 1, 40,718 in year 2, and 42,005 in year 3. A graduate cadet on commissioning starts on a pay scale which includes military service allowance from 48,505, depending on the type, and then 48,000 on the type of appointment. A school leaver cadet starts at 43,000. Now, that is above most starting rates across the public service. The point is we need to develop a more positive narrative about the Defence Forces than some deputies suggested today.